Amid Christmas music filling the crowded mall, a young, deaf woman named Astrid sat alone at a small table, eyes red from crying after her family refused to bring her home on Christmas Eve. No one noticed her tears until a blonde little girl tugged a tall man's sleeve and pointed at her. The single father stepped forward and signed, "If you have nowhere to go tonight, come home with us." Could one simple gesture change a person's entire life on that cold December night? Astrid Larissa was 27 years old, and the world had grown silent for her at age 14 when a severe fever took her hearing away forever. She had adapted as well as anyone could, learning to read lips with precision, mastering sign language with the same dedication she brought to her illustration work. Her face held a delicate beauty that often made people stare, though not always for reasons that made her comfortable. Long waves of blonde hair framed features that seemed too soft for the hardness life had shown her. Tonight, she wore a white knit dress beneath a pale blue wool coat, the kind of outfit she had chosen carefully because her family had told her this dinner mattered, that they wanted to spend the holiday together for once. But her family had never truly accepted what happened to her. To them, her deafness was a burden, an embarrassment, something they mentioned in hushed tones when they thought she was not looking. Her mother had stopped learning to sign after the first month. Her father rarely made eye contact anymore. Her older sister, Amanda, treated her like a child who could not be trusted with real responsibilities. They had found every excuse over the years to exclude her from important events, from celebrations, from the simple daily rhythms of family life. And tonight, on Christmas Eve, they had done it again. The text message had arrived 2 hours ago while Astrid sat in the food court, waiting. "Family emergency," it read, as if those 2 words could excuse the fact that she had traveled across the city in the snow, had dressed up, had allowed herself to hope. She knew there was no emergency. There was only the same tired shame they felt about having a daughter who was different, who required patience, who reminded them that not everything in life could be controlled or fixed. She had stayed at the mall because she had nowhere else to go. Her small apartment felt too empty tonight, too full of the artwork she created in solitude, too quiet even for someone who lived in permanent silence. So she sat by the fountain and watched families pass by, watched children pull their parents toward the enormous Christmas tree in the center of the atrium, watched couples hold hands and laugh at private jokes. She watched and felt the familiar ache of being separate from a world that moved too fast for her to keep up, a world that rarely slowed down long enough to let her in. Henry Corbin noticed her because his daughter Audrey noticed her first. At 35, Henry had learned to see the world through his child's eyes, to pay attention to the things she found important. Audrey was 7 years old, bright and observant in the way children often are before the world teaches them to look away from suffering. She had blonde hair like her father's late wife, blue eyes that seemed too large for her small face, and a heart that broke easily for anyone in pain. "Daddy," she whispered, pulling on his sleeve. Henry followed his daughter's gaze across the crowded food court. He saw what Audrey saw, a young woman sitting alone, her shoulders curved inward as if trying to make herself smaller, tears sliding down her cheeks that she wiped away quickly, as if ashamed to be seen. "I think she cannot hear," Audrey added quietly. "Like my friend Emma at school." Henry's chest tightened. He had worked briefly as a freelance electronics repair technician at a community center years ago, back before Audrey was born, back when his wife was still alive, and they were young and broke and taking any job they could find. One of his co-workers there had been deaf, a patient man named Marcus who had taught Henry the basics of sign language during lunch breaks and slow afternoons. Henry had never become fluent, but he remembered enough. He remembered the shapes his hands needed to make, the way communication could exist beyond sound. His wife had left when Audrey was 2 years old. She had looked at their small apartment, at Henry's irregular income, at the life of modest struggle stretching ahead of them, and she had decided it was not enough. She had wanted more money, more status, more than Henry could provide. So she had walked away, and Henry had raised their daughter alone, working long hours, accepting help from their neighbor Constance Matilda when childcare was needed, building a life that was simple but full of love. He knew what it felt like to be abandoned. He knew what it felt like to sit alone during a holiday and wonder if anyone in the world cared that you existed. "Come on," he said softly to Audrey. "Let's go say hello." They crossed the food court together, weaving between tables and chairs. Audrey held her father's hand tightly, nervous but determined. When they reached Astrid's table, Henry cleared his throat gently, then realized the futility of the sound. Instead, he moved into her line of sight slowly, not wanting to startle her. Audrey followed his lead, standing beside him with the natural courage of a child who had not yet learned to be afraid of being kind. Astrid looked up, confusion crossing her face, then something like wariness. She was used to being approached by strangers who either pitied her or wanted something from her. But when Henry raised his hands and began to sign, her expression shifted to surprise. "Are you okay?" he signed, his movements careful and deliberate. Astrid blinked, fresh tears welling in her eyes, but these felt different somehow. No one had signed to her in months, maybe longer. No one had bothered to meet her in her own language. She signed back slowly. "I am fine, thank you." Audrey tugged on her father's sleeve. "What did she say?" Henry knelt beside his daughter. "She says she is fine, but I do not think that is true. Do you remember the signs I taught you in the car?" Audrey nodded seriously. She stepped forward, suddenly shy, and raised her small hands. "Hello," she signed, the gesture clumsy but earnest. "My name is Audrey." The transformation in Astrid's face was immediate. She smiled through her tears, a real smile that reached her eyes and softened the lines of worry around her mouth. She signed back carefully, making sure the little girl could follow. "Hello, Audrey. My name is Astrid." "You sign very well." Audrey beamed with pride. "My daddy taught me. He says everyone deserves to be heard." Astrid's hands stilled. She looked up at Henry, and for a long moment they simply regarded each other across the small distance between them. He saw intelligence in her eyes, and pain, and a wariness that spoke of too many disappointments. She saw kindness in his, and something else she could not quite name, something that made her feel less alone than she had felt in years. "Do you have somewhere to go tonight?" Henry signed. "It is Christmas Eve. No one should be alone." Astrid hesitated. The truth was complicated, layered with shame and hurt and the kind of family dysfunction that was difficult to explain to a stranger. But there was something about this man, about his daughter, about the simple fact that they had crossed a crowded food court to reach her, that made her want to trust them. "My family," she began, then stopped. She tried again. "I was supposed to meet them, but they canceled. I do not want to go home to an empty apartment." "Then come with us," Henry signed. "We are going to have dinner and then go home to decorate our tree. You are welcome to join us." Astrid stared at him. People did not do things like this. Strangers did not invite deaf women they had never met to their homes on Christmas Eve. This was the kind of thing that existed in movies, in stories. Not in real life where people were busy and self-absorbed and rarely looked beyond their own concerns. But Audrey had already decided. She reached out and took Astrid's hand in her small one, holding on with the kind of innocent certainty that only children possess. "Please come," she said out loud, the words halting and earnest. "We have extra cookies, and my daddy makes really good hot chocolate." Astrid felt something crack open in her chest, some wall she had built to protect herself from disappointment. She looked at Henry, searching his face for any sign of pity or condescension, but found only genuine warmth. She looked at Audrey, who smiled up at her with such pure hope that refusing felt impossible. She had been carrying something in her coat pocket all evening, A Christmas card she had intended to give to her family, a card with a message written in her careful handwriting. Inside the card was a printed certificate, an announcement that she had won an international illustration competition, that her work had been recognized by people who saw value in what she created. She had wanted to share this with her family, had imagined their faces when they learned that she was not useless, not a burden, that she had accomplished something real and meaningful. But they had not shown up to receive it, and the card felt heavy now, a reminder of hope misplaced. "Okay," she signed, finally, her hands shaking slightly. The mall experienced a power surge just as they were preparing to leave, the lights flickering once, twice, then going dark completely. Emergency lighting kicked in after a few seconds, but the bright, festive atmosphere had transformed into something dimmer and more ominous. The storm outside had intensified, snow falling heavily now, wind rattling the tall windows that lined the mall's perimeter. Astrid felt panic rise in her throat immediately. Darkness terrified her in a way it did not frighten others, because she could not hear warnings in the dark, could not hear footsteps approaching, could not hear danger until it was too late. When she was a child, her older sister had locked her in a closet during a thunderstorm as a joke, not understanding that for Astrid, the experience was not mischief, but trauma. She had beaten on the door for what felt like hours, screaming silently into the void, until her mother finally found her and pulled her out, angry at the mess she had made, dismissive of her tears. Now, the mall filled with the confused sounds she could not hear, with announcements over loudspeakers she could not understand, with the general chaos of too many people in too little light. She stood frozen by the fountain, her breath coming too fast, her vision narrowing to a tunnel. Then Henry was there, moving into her line of sight with careful intention. His hands formed the shapes she needed to see. "Do not be afraid. Follow me. I will keep you safe." The crowd surged around them, people trying to exit, trying to find their cars, trying to reach their families. Astrid felt herself being jostled, felt the press of bodies too close, felt the overwhelming sensation of being lost in a sea of people she could not communicate with. Her hands clutched at her coat, her whole body trembling with the effort of staying calm. Henry reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, and took her hand. His grip was firm but gentle, anchoring. With his other hand he held Audrey, and together they formed a small chain as he navigated through the chaos toward the exit. Audrey looked back at Astrid every few steps, offering small smiles of encouragement, her presence a bright point in the confusion. A security guard appeared in front of them suddenly, his mouth moving rapidly, his expression stern. Astrid could not read his lips in the dim light, could not understand what he was saying, but she saw the sharpness of his gestures and assumed he was angry, assumed she had done something wrong. The panic that had been building in her chest peaked, and she felt her knees weaken, felt the room start to spin. Henry stepped between them immediately, his body shielding Astrid from the guard's line of sight. He spoke to the man, his mouth moving in what looked like calm explanation, one hand still holding Astrid's, making it clear that she was with him, that she was not alone, or lost, or in need of assistance beyond his. The guard nodded after a moment and moved on to deal with other concerns, and Henry turned back to Astrid. He signed with one hand, awkward but determined. "He is gone. You are safe. We are almost outside." Audrey squeezed Astrid's hand, and the simple pressure of it, the uncomplicated comfort of a child's trust, helped Astrid breathe again. They made it to the exit and pushed through the doors into the cold night air. Snow fell thick and fast around them, the parking lot already covered in a layer of white that made the familiar landscape look strange and dreamlike. The storm had turned serious while they were inside, the kind of Christmas blizzard that would dominate the news tomorrow, that would trap people in their homes and make travel dangerous. But for now, standing in the glow of the mall's exterior lights, feeling the cold sting of snowflakes on her face, Astrid felt her panic begin to recede. She could see clearly out here, could orient herself in space, could breathe without feeling like the walls were closing in. Henry led them to his car, an older sedan that had seen better days but was clearly well maintained. He opened the passenger door for Astrid, a gesture of courtesy that felt formal and oddly touching, then settled Audrey in the back seat. Before he started the engine, he turned to Astrid and signed carefully. "The roads will be bad. It might take a while to get home." Astrid nodded. She was more than okay. The idea of going back to her empty apartment now, of spending Christmas Eve alone after everything that had happened, felt unbearable. This stranger and his daughter were offering her something she had not experienced in years, the simple gift of not being alone. Henry drove carefully through the snow-covered streets, his hands steady on the wheel, his attention focused on the road. Audrey chattered from the back seat, her voice carrying the kind of excitement that comes from unexpected adventure. Astrid watched the city pass by through the window, the familiar buildings made magical by the falling snow, and felt something unfamiliar stirring in her chest. Hope, maybe, or the beginning of it. The sense that maybe, just maybe, Christmas could be different this year. But then the car hit a patch of ice and skidded sideways, and Henry had to fight to keep them on the road. He managed it, barely, pulling them out of the skid and bringing the car safely to the shoulder. His hands were shaking slightly when he turned off the engine. They sat in silence for a moment, the snow piling up on the windshield, the world outside muffled and white. "I am sorry," Henry signed. "That was frightening." Astrid shook her head. "You kept us safe. Thank you." From the back seat, Audrey spoke, her voice small and serious. "Daddy, I think Miss Astrid needs a family. Can we be her family?" Henry's expression softened as he looked at his daughter in the rearview mirror. "Sweetheart, we just met her. But she does not have anywhere to go," Audrey insisted. "And it is Christmas. And I like her. She is nice." Through the window, Astrid watched the exchange, unable to hear the words but reading the tenderness in their faces. She saw Audrey's earnest expression, saw Henry's gentle response, and felt tears build behind her eyes again. When Audrey looked at her and smiled, when the little girl pressed her palm against the window that separated them as if reaching out, Astrid felt something inside her break and mend at the same time. Henry got out to push the car free from the snowdrift they had slid into, his coat immediately covered in white, his breath visible in the cold air. Astrid watched him work. This stranger who had chosen to help her, who was now literally digging her out of the snow. The metaphor was not lost on her. She had been buried for so long, trapped under the weight of her family's rejection, her own sense of worthlessness, the accumulated disappointments of being different in a world that punished difference. And here was someone willing to get cold and wet and tired to pull her free. When they finally made it to Henry's apartment building, the warmth that greeted them felt like an embrace. It was a modest place, the kind of building where working families lived, where neighbors knew each other's names and helped with groceries. Henry's apartment was on the 3rd floor, a small 2-bedroom unit that felt instantly welcoming. The furniture was worn but clean, the walls decorated with Audrey's drawings and school projects. A small Christmas tree stood in the corner, half decorated, ornaments scattered on the coffee table as if they had been interrupted mid-celebration. "Welcome to our home," Henry signed, his expression shy, as if worried she might judge the simplicity of what he was offering. But Astrid felt no judgment, only relief. She looked around at the warm yellow lights, at the stockings hung on the wall, at the simple beauty of a space filled with love rather than expensive things. It reminded her of the home she had imagined for herself as a child, before she understood that her family's version of success was measured in square footage and status rather than in moments of quiet happiness. Audrey ran to her room and returned with a blanket, which she carefully draped over Astrid's shoulders. "You are cold," she announced solemnly. "You need to be warm." Astrid pulled the blanket tighter, touched by the gesture, and signed her thanks. Henry disappeared into the kitchen and returned with 2 mugs of hot chocolate, the steam rising in lazy spirals. He handed one to Astrid and kept one for himself, then sat down across from her, maintaining a respectful distance. For a long time, they simply sat together in the warm glow of the Christmas lights. Audrey worked on decorating the tree, humming to herself, occasionally turning to show Astrid a particularly pretty ornament. Henry watched his daughter with the kind of gentle attentiveness that spoke of deep love, and Astrid felt her chest tighten with an emotion she could not quite name. Eventually, Henry picked up a notepad and pen from the coffee table and wrote carefully, "You do not have to tell me anything you do not want to tell me. But if you want to talk, I am here to listen. Or watch, I guess." He added a small smiley face at the end, and Astrid found herself laughing, the sound strange to her own throat but real. She took the pen and paper, her hands steadier now, and began to write. "My family was supposed to meet me tonight, they promised, but they canceled at the last minute. They have never accepted that I am deaf. They see me as broken, as an embarrassment. Tonight was just the latest disappointment in a very long line of disappointments." Henry read her words, his expression serious, and wrote back, "They are wrong. You are not broken. You are not an embarrassment. I can see that, even though I just met you." Astrid felt her eyes fill with tears again, but these were different. These were tears of release, of finally being seen by someone who looked at her and did not flinch away. She pulled the Christmas card from her coat pocket, the one she had carried all evening, and handed it to Henry. He opened it carefully, reading the message she had written to her family, then unfolding the certificate inside. His eyes widened as he read it, and when he looked up at her, his expression was filled with genuine amazement and respect. Audrey tugged on his sleeve. "What is it, Daddy?" Henry showed his daughter the certificate, explaining in simple terms that Astrid had won a very important prize for her art, that people from all over the world had recognized how talented she was. Audrey's face lit up with delight, and she immediately ran to Astrid and threw her arms around her neck. "You are famous," she declared, her voice muffled against Astrid's shoulder. Astrid hugged the little girl back, her heart so full it felt like it might overflow. When Audrey pulled away, Astrid took the notepad and wrote, "My family did not care about this. They did not even wait to hear about it. But you care. You both care. And you are strangers. Why?" Henry's response was simple but profound. "Because some things matter more than blood. Because kindness is not limited by how well you know someone. Because no one deserves to be alone on Christmas Eve. And because," he added, looking directly into her eyes, "you are worth caring about." The words settled into Astrid's chest like stones dropping into still water, creating ripples that spread outward, touching places in her heart that had been frozen for years. They spent the evening decorating the tree together, the 3 of them working in quiet harmony. Henry helped Audrey hang the higher ornaments, while Astrid arranged the lower ones, her artist's eye creating a balance and beauty that transformed their simple tree into something special. They drank hot chocolate and ate cookies that were slightly burned but still delicious. They played a card game that Audrey taught Astrid, the rules simple enough to follow without words. And slowly, gradually, Astrid felt something inside her unclench, some terrible tension she had carried for so long that she had forgotten it was there. Then, near midnight, there was a sharp knock at the door. Henry opened it to find a woman standing in the hallway, her expression cold and furious. Astrid recognized her immediately and stood up, the blanket falling from her shoulders, her whole body going rigid with shock and fear. Amanda Wilfred, Astrid's older sister, pushed past Henry without invitation and strode into the apartment. She was dressed expensively, her hair perfect despite the snow, her coat designer and spotless. She looked around the modest space with barely concealed disdain, her lip curling slightly at the worn furniture, the humble Christmas decorations, the obvious poverty of the place. "What the hell do you think you are doing, Astrid?" Amanda demanded, her words sharp and cutting. Her mouth moved rapidly, angrily, and Astrid struggled to read the words, catching only fragments. Embarrassing the family. Irresponsible. Stranger's home. Henry moved to stand beside Astrid, his presence solid and protective. He spoke to Amanda in a tone that was calm but firm, though Astrid could not hear what he said. Whatever it was made Amanda turn her attention to him, her expression shifting to something even more contemptuous. "And who are you?" Amanda asked, her voice dripping with scorn that Astrid could read even without sound. "Some random man who thinks he can fix my broken sister? She cannot hear you, in case you have not noticed. She is useless, a burden, and she certainly does not need you playing hero." Audrey burst from her room where she had retreated when the yelling started, her small face fierce with anger and hurt. She ran to Astrid and wrapped her arms around her waist, glaring at Amanda with all the righteous fury of a child who has witnessed injustice. "She is not a burden," Audrey shouted, her voice cracking with emotion. "She is the nicest person I ever met. You are being mean." Amanda turned her cold gaze to the little girl. "This is none of your concern, child. Astrid is coming home with me now, where she belongs." But Henry stepped forward, putting himself between Amanda and Astrid. When he spoke, his hands moved at the same time, signing for Astrid's benefit even as his words reached her sister. "Astrid does not have to go anywhere she does not want to go. She is an adult, and from what I understand, your family abandoned her tonight. You do not get to show up now and pretend you care." She signed slowly, making sure Astrid could see. "Do you want to leave? Do you want to go with your sister?" Astrid's hands trembled as she signed back, her movements small but definite. "No, I do not want to go. I want to stay here, where people see me as a person, not as a problem to be solved or hidden away." Amanda's face flushed with anger and something that might have been shame, though she would never admit it. "You are making a scene," she hissed. "You are embarrassing yourself and this family." "I am making a choice," Astrid signed, her movements growing stronger, more certain. "I am choosing to be somewhere I am wanted for once. I am choosing people who do not look at me with pity or disgust. I am choosing to start my life over, away from all of you." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with years of accumulated hurt. Amanda opened her mouth to respond, then closed it again. For just a moment, something flickered across her face, something that might have been regret or recognition of the damage that had been done. But it passed quickly, replaced by the familiar mask of cold superiority. "Fine," Amanda said finally. "If you want to throw away your family for these strangers, that is your choice. But do not come crying back to us when this all falls apart. Do not expect us to take you back when he gets tired of babysitting a deaf girl who cannot even take care of herself." She turned on her heel and left, slamming the door behind her hard enough to rattle the frame. In the silence that followed, Astrid felt her knees weaken. She had stood up to her sister for the first time in her life, had chosen herself over the family that had rejected her, and the weight of it was overwhelming. Henry caught her elbow gently, steadying her, and led her to the couch. Audrey climbed up beside her and took her hand, holding it tightly. "You were very brave," Henry signed, his expression filled with admiration and concern. Astrid took a shaky breath and signed back. "I do not know, but I think I will be." That night, Astrid slept on Henry's couch, wrapped in warm blankets that smelled faintly of laundry detergent and cinnamon. She lay awake for a long time, watching the lights from the Christmas tree cast gentle shadows on the ceiling, listening to the silence that was her constant companion. But this silence felt different somehow. It felt less like isolation and more like peace. In the morning, Audrey was the first one awake, as children often are on Christmas morning. She crept into the living room and found Astrid already sitting up, watching the snow fall outside the window. The storm had passed during the night, leaving the city blanketed in white, pristine, and beautiful. Audrey held out a small wrapped package, the paper wrinkled and the bow crooked, clearly wrapped by small hands without adult supervision. "For you," she whispered, even though she knew Astrid could not hear. But Astrid understood anyway, taking the gift with trembling hands. Inside was a pair of knitted gloves, cream-colored and soft, slightly uneven in places but made with obvious care. They fit perfectly when Astrid tried them on, and she looked up at Audrey with tears in her eyes. "I made them," Audrey signed carefully, the movements clumsy but sincere. "So your hands will not be cold when you talk." The simple thoughtfulness of it, the recognition that Astrid's hands were her voice, that keeping them warm meant keeping her ability to communicate intact, broke something loose in Astrid's chest. She pulled Audrey into a hug, holding the little girl close, feeling the way her small body fit perfectly in her arms. Henry appeared in the doorway, holding 3 mugs of coffee and hot chocolate, his hair still messy from sleep. He smiled when he saw them embracing, a smile that was soft and genuine and full of warmth. He set the mugs down and sat on the edge of the couch, and for a moment the 3 of them simply existed together in the golden morning light. Eventually, Henry picked up the notepad and wrote carefully. "I know we just met. I know this is all very fast and probably overwhelming. But if you need a place to stay while you figure things out, you are welcome here. For as long as you need. No pressure, no expectations. Just a safe place and people who care about you." Astrid read his words 3 times, making sure she understood, making sure this was real and not some dream she would wake from to find herself alone again. But the gloves on her hands were real, the little girl beside her was real, and the man looking at her with such gentle sincerity was real. She picked up the pen and wrote 3 words, her hand steady despite the tears streaming down her face. "I want to stay." Henry's smile grew wider, and Audrey squealed with delight, throwing her arms around Astrid's neck again. They sat together on the couch, 3 people who had been strangers less than 24 hours ago, now forming something that felt remarkably like a family. Later, they would have breakfast together, scrambled eggs and toast that tasted better than any fancy meal Astrid had ever eaten. They would open small presents, nothing expensive but chosen with care. They would spend the day playing games and watching Audrey's favorite movies and simply being together. And in the evening, when Audrey fell asleep between them on the couch, Henry and Astrid would look at each other over her head and understand that something profound had shifted. But for now, on Christmas morning, with snow falling softly outside and the tree lights twinkling in the corner, Astrid felt something she had not felt in more years than she could count. She felt like she belonged. She felt like she had come home. And in the warmth of that feeling, in the simple acceptance of 2 people who had chosen to see her value when her own family could not, Astrid found the courage to believe that maybe, just maybe, her life could be different from this day forward. If you believe that a single act of kindness can change a life, that family is not always about blood but about choosing to love someone despite and because of their differences, that everyone deserves to be seen and valued and welcomed home, then carry this story with you. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because somewhere tonight, someone is sitting alone in a crowded place, waiting for a hand to reach out, waiting for someone to say in whatever language they understand, "Come home with us. You are not alone anymore."